He thought it was just another charity dinner. Just another speech, another applause, another beautiful plate placed in front of him. He had no idea that the food he was about to taste was meant to be his last meal. And he certainly didn't expect a skinny, barefoot boy from the street to sprint across the marble floor, shove past security, and scream from the bottom of his lungs, "Don't eat it!" Everything stopped. Forks froze midair. Cameras swung toward the boy. Billionaire Victor Hale stared at the trembling child, hovering at the edge of his seat, a forkful of food inches from his lips. He had no idea that this moment, this one interrupted bite, would expose a betrayal years in the making, change his life forever, and force him to confront the person he'd become. But to understand why that boy was so desperate, we need to rewind. Victor Hale was the kind of man people read about in magazines. He owned glass towers that pierced the clouds. His name sat on hospital wings, university libraries, and tech campuses. Business channels called him a visionary. Newspapers called him the man who rebuilt the city after the flood. But if you asked him, he would have told you something different. He would have said he was just a poor kid who got tired of being hungry. Victor had grown up in the rough part of town, back when the city's high-rises were still dreams drawn at the edge of his notebooks. His mother had scrubbed floors at offices that smelled like polished steel and coffee, while his father disappeared into jobs that never paid enough. He remembered what it felt like to stand in line at a soup kitchen, clutching a chipped plastic bowl with numb fingers. He remembered the sound of his stomach growling at night. That memory had driven him for decades. It pushed him through business school, through sleepless nights at his first failing startup, through every risk that others said was too big or too crazy. He clawed his way up, one deal at a time, until the city that once ignored him now lit up at the mention of his name. He told himself he'd never be that hungry boy again. He also promised himself he'd never forget the people still living like that. So, in public, Victor Hale was not just rich, he was generous. He funded shelters, built low-income housing, and hosted big charity galas in hotel ballrooms where chandeliers looked like frozen fireworks. Tonight, he was hosting one of those galas. Across the city, while Victor's staff-ironed tuxedos and polished crystal, a boy woke up on a piece of cardboard. Liam didn't know how old the cardboard had once been. All he knew was that last night it had been softer than the concrete, and when the wind blew under the bridge, the cardboard trapped just enough warmth for him to sleep. He sat up, pulling his thin hoodie tighter. Cars roared above him, their headlights streaking between the gaps like artificial stars. At 12 years old, he had learned to distinguish sounds the way other kids learn video game levels. The distant wail of an ambulance, the hiss of a bus door, the sudden shatter of a bottle somewhere far off, and the soft thud of a food truck's back door closing at exactly 5 a.m. His eyes opened fully. Too early to miss free food, he muttered to himself. Liam slid his small backpack around his shoulders, the one holding all his treasures, a broken toy car, a half-used notebook, and a photograph whose edges had been worn soft by his fingers. He pressed the photo to his chest for a second, a woman with tired eyes but a warm smile, then tucked it back inside and climbed up toward the street. The city at dawn was its own world. Delivery trucks exhaled steam. Shopkeepers rolled up metal shutters. Coffee shops spilled warm air and sleepy workers onto sidewalks. Liam didn't belong to any of those places. He belonged to the gaps between them, alleyways, back doors, loading docks. He moved quickly toward one particular alley, the one behind the luxury hotel where, once a week, people in black uniforms wheeled out trays of food they didn't need anymore. They didn't call it leftovers. They called it waste. But to Liam, it was breakfast. While Liam waited in the shadows behind the hotel, Victor stepped out of his black car in front of it. Flashbulbs popped immediately. Reporters shouted his name. Mr. Hale. Over here. Sir, is it true you're donating 10 million tonight? Victor, look this way. He smiled, the kind of practiced smile that made people believe everything was under control. At his side, his assistant, Elena, moved with calm efficiency, whispering reminders. The press conference is at 7:30, she murmured. Then the donor meet and greet, then dinner. And the chef wanted to confirm your allergy list one more time. Apparently your main dish tonight is a custom creation. Victor chuckled. Does it have profit margins and angry shareholders in it? Elena smirked. No, but if anyone could eat that and survive, it'd be you. He nodded politely to the cameras, waved, and walked through the revolving doors into a lobby that smelled like polished wood and money. The hotel worker straightened. The manager practically jogged over to shake his hand. The world seemed designed to make Victor feel important. But part of him, buried deep under the layers of suits and deals, still saw every chandelier as a reminder of something he'd once stared at through glass. From the outside, back at the alley, Liam watched a kitchen worker push out a cart stacked with metal trays. The man grumbled to himself, lighting a cigarette as he kicked the doorstop into place. Always overcook for these billionaires, the worker muttered. Then toss half of it. Ridiculous. He flicked ash toward the drain. Liam stepped out. Careful, head dipped. Excuse me, sir, he said. Do you have anything you're throwing away? The worker glanced at him, irritation in his eyes softened by something like pity. You again, he said. Look, kid, I could get fired. He hesitated. Then he shook his head, exhaled, and reached for one of the covered trays. What they don't see won't hurt them, he muttered, lifting the lid. Inside was food that looked prettier than anything Liam had ever seen. Neat circles of salmon, bright vegetables, small towers of rice like artwork. He handed Liam a paper plate and scooped some on. Hey, eat it around the corner. If someone complains, I don't know you. Liam's eyes lit with gratitude. Thank you, he whispered, clutching the plate like it was made of gold. He didn't know that in a few hours, someone would place a near-identical plate in front of a billionaire's face, with one deadly difference. That afternoon, the hotel's kitchen buzzed like a beehive. Chefs shouted orders. Pans sizzled. Sauce simmered in gleaming pots. The head chef, Marco, moved between stations like a general before a battle, checking every detail. The main course needs to be perfect, he barked. This isn't just dinner, it's a statement. Behind him, a man in a dark suit watched carefully. His name was Miles Crane. He was Victor Hale's partner, on paper, co-founder, trusted ally. The media called them the Twin Titans. They had started their first company together in a cramped office with peeling paint and shared instant noodles. Miles had not grown up poor. He had grown up entitled. This whole gala had been his suggestion. A night to reconnect with your roots, Victor, he had said, clapping his friend on the back. People love that stuff. The billionaire who remembers where he came from. It'll boost the brand. And hey, a few million to charity doesn't hurt us. He never said the word us without calculating how much of that us could become me. Now, in the kitchen doorway, Miles checked his watch. Chef Marco, he said, his voice smooth. Is Mr. Hale's special plate ready? Marco nodded, wiping his forehead. Almost, sir. I will prepare it last, so it is fresh. Good, Miles smiled. I know his particular. He turned to leave. Then he noticed something. Near the side door, the same one where leftovers had been wheeled out that morning, a figure was hovering. Small, thin, familiar. The homeless kid. Miles frowned. He watched as the kitchen worker who'd helped Liam earlier gave him a quick nod and slipped him a small container wrapped in foil. The boy's face lit up. He whispered thanks and darted away. Miles didn't care that a hungry child was getting food. He cared that someone was breaking rules. If someone breaks one rule, they might break others. He filed that away, because Miles Crane had always been good at seeing weaknesses. And today, he planned to exploit all of them. Upstairs, in his private suite, Victor buttoned his cufflinks in the mirror. He should have felt confident. These events were his stage. He knew how to smile, to talk about impact and vision and giving back. But something felt off today. Maybe it was the argument he'd had with Elena that morning. You can't keep ignoring the numbers, she had said, dropping a stack of reports on his desk. What numbers? He'd muttered, rubbing his temples. The ones that show your name is on half the city, but your companies are drowning in debt, she replied. The expansions, the new towers, the overpriced acquisitions, they're all taking a toll. He'd waved it off. We'll recover. We always do. And Miles, she asked quietly, you're letting him handle more and more on his own. Are you sure that's wise? Victor had looked up, a flash of irritation in his eyes. "Miles has been with me since the beginning," he said. "He's earned my trust." Elena had opened her mouth, closed it, and sighed. "Just be careful tonight," she had said. "Not everyone in that ballroom cares about your vision, Victor. Some just see a man they can push off a throne." Those words echoed now in the quiet of the suite. Be careful tonight. He shook the thought away. Paranoia didn't suit him. He straightened his tie, drew in a breath, and walked out to meet his guests. As the evening began, Victor stood on the balcony overlooking the ballroom. He watched people arrive, shiny dresses, sharp suits, sequins like stars. He could see himself in them, or at least, the man he had turned into to survive in their world. But every time he saw a waiter balancing a tray, he remembered his mother's hands, red and raw from chemicals, holding him up. He remembered being 13, standing outside a bakery window, watching other kids pick anything they wanted from a glass case while he counted the coins in his pocket, coming up short. That day, an older man had walked by, noticed him staring, and bought him a warm loaf of bread. "Always remember," the man had said, "sometimes the smallest act of kindness can save someone's whole day." Victor had promised himself he'd grow up to be that kind of man. Somewhere along the way, he wondered if he'd become the opposite. Lately, he'd been too busy to visit the shelters his foundation funded, too busy to read the letters from people asking for help, too busy to notice the gap between the image of caring billionaire and the reality of his decisions. The voice in his head whispered, "When was the last time you looked a homeless person in the eye? When was the last time you stopped your car instead of rolling up your window?" He pushed that voice down, focusing instead on the stage where his name would be announced later. Down in the streets, Liam had his own voice to wrestle with. After the kitchen worker handed him that small 4-wrap container earlier, Liam had run back to his hiding spot under the bridge. He sat with his back against the cold stone, unwrapped the food carefully, and stared. It was beautiful. Little pieces of chicken in a golden sauce, vegetables cut into perfect shapes. It smelled like spices he couldn't name. He lifted a piece to his mouth. Then he froze. A memory hit him. A hospital room. A plate of food on a tray. His mother pushing it away, shaking her head. "Mom, you have to eat," his younger self pleaded. She had given him a tired smile. "I will," she said. "Just not this." Later, when she had finally taken a bite, something had changed. Her face went pale. Machines beeped frantically. Nurses rushed in. Liam hadn't understood back then. All he remembered was the doctor's voice later, hushed in the corner with an S. "They said it was a mistake," the nurse whispered. "The wrong medication mixed into her food. It wasn't meant for her." "Tell that to the boy who just lost his mother," the doctor replied, anger in his tone. Liam had never forgotten that phrase. It wasn't meant for her. Sometimes, when he found food in the trash behind certain restaurants, he wondered, who was this meant for originally, and what happened to them? Now, as he lifted the piece of chicken, his stomach growled painfully, but something else tugged at his attention. There was a smell. Faint, sharp, underneath the spices. He paused. He wasn't an expert. He wasn't a chef. He was a 12-year-old who'd eaten things most people would call inedible. But his instincts had kept him alive so far. He sniffed again. That smell, it reminded him of the cleaning supplies the hospital used. The kind that made his eyes water. He lowered the food. "Don't be stupid," he muttered to himself. "You're just hungry. You're imagining things." Yet he couldn't shake the feeling. He wrapped the food back up, hesitating. What if he was wrong? He'd just thrown away the best meal he'd seen in weeks. What if he was right? He pushed it aside and curled up, clutching his knees. His mind brought back another memory. His mother's voice, weak but firm, the night before she died. "Promise me something, Liam," she whispered, fingers wrapped around his. "What?" he replied, tears streaking his cheeks. "If you ever see someone about to make the same mistake I did, you stop them," she said. "Even if they are bigger than you. Even if they don't listen. You shout if you have to." He had nodded, choking on his sobs. "I promise." Then he watched the monitor go flat. Liam wiped his eyes now, in the cold underpass. That was just a hospital accident, he told himself. This is just food. Still, He couldn't make himself eat it. He shoved the container deep into his backpack. He had no idea that choice, that one refusal driven by instinct and memory, would put him straight in the path of a billionaire hours later. Back at the hotel, things were already shifting under the surface. While Victor mingled with donors and shook hands, Elena was in a small side room, staring at her laptop. Something in the financial reports bothered her. Lines that didn't match. Transfers scheduled at odd hours. Unusual withdrawals linked to shell companies that barely existed on paper. She scrolled, frowning. Why would the foundation's funds pass through that account? She muttered. She clicked again. A name appeared as the authorizing signature. Miles Crane. Her heart sank. Elena. A voice at the door. She snapped the laptop shut as Miles stepped in. All smooth charm. There you are, he said. Victor was asking where his favorite assistant disappeared to. I'll be right out, she replied, forcing a smile. Miles watched her for a beat. You know, he said lightly, tonight is important. For all of us. No surprises, right? The way he said it made it sound less like a question and more like a warning. She swallowed. Of course. He nodded, satisfied. But the unease in her chest only grew. Later that evening, as the sky turned purple and the city lights blinked awake, Liam wandered toward the hotel district again. He had no intention of going near the kitchen this time. He knew he'd already pushed his luck. He just liked to watch. Through tall windows, he saw people dressed in clothes that looked like movie costumes. He saw waiters moving like dancers, weaving between tables. He saw towers of desserts, chandeliers, and ice sculptures shaped like swans. He pressed his face against a cold window pane, fogging it up with his breath. One day, his mother had told him, they'd walk into a place like that together. Not as staff. Not begging for leftovers. Just once, she had said, I want to eat in a place where someone brings me my food on a tray and calls me. He swallowed hard and blinked away the sting in his eyes. He pulled his backpack closer. That 4-wrap container bumped against his side. He paused. What if someone inside was eating the same thing? What if that smell meant something? He looked down at the hotel logo etched on the glass. A memory flickered. The time his mother's hospital food had come from a different kitchen, delivered in a hurry from some prestigious partner catering company. His legs moved before his brain finished the thought. He walked around the building, looking for the back entrance. In the kitchen, Chef Marco was plating Victor's special dish with intense focus. The ingredients had been personally approved, the wine reduction perfect, the garnish arranged like art. One of his junior chefs approached. Chef, the supplier for the truffle oil called again. The young man said. They said the last delivery you received, it wasn't from them. Someone else signed in their name. Marco frowned. That makes no sense. We have one supplier. I know, the junior chef replied, but they said the batch with the serial number. He held out a small sticker. It's not theirs. Marco took it, his brow furrowing deeply. Enough, came Miles's voice from the doorway, smooth and calm. He walked over, picking up the bottle of truffle oil on the counter as if it were nothing more than a garnish. You're worrying over nothing, Miles said to the junior chef. These things happen. Mix-ups, paperwork errors. Do you have any idea how many companies move products through these kitchens? The junior chef hesitated. Yes, sir, but... Do you trust your head chef? Miles cut in. The young man glanced at Marco, who still looked troubled. Yes. Then focus on your station, Miles said. Mr. Hale's plate needs to be perfect. This is not the night to be paranoid. He smiled, but there was steel in his eyes. The junior chef backed away. Marco forced a laugh, trying to shake off his unease. Of course, he muttered. Paranoia in the kitchen is like too much salt. Ruins the dish, eh? Miles clapped him on the shoulder and left the room. He paused only once, near a side counter, to pull out his phone and send a message. All good. The plate will be served. Make sure he eats it. He hit send. Here's the truth. This was never just about food. It was about power. Miles Crane had watched Victor rise from nothing. He had ridden that wave with him. But somewhere along the way, something twisted inside him. At first, it was jealousy. Victor's face on magazine covers. Victor's name on buildings. Victor's speeches quoted everywhere. You wouldn't be here without me, Miles would think, smiling in photos beside him. Why do they only see him? Then, jealousy turned into resentment. Every time Victor chose to donate another fortune, Miles saw it as money taken from his pockets. Every time Victor refused a shady deal on principle, Miles saw it as lost opportunity. So he started making his own deals. Quietly, he opened accounts in remote jurisdictions. He used shell companies to siphon small amounts from large transactions. Nothing big enough to notice at first. But greed, like hunger, grows. By the time Elena stumbled onto those transfers, Miles had already moved more money than he'd ever admit. There was just one problem. If Victor discovered the missing funds, he'd put a stop to it. Twice, he might go public, and Miles couldn't allow that. So he came up with a plan. A simple, terrible plan. If Victor died, the narrative would be tragic but clean. Beloved billionaire passes away suddenly at his own charity gala. The public would mourn. The company's stock would wobble, then steady. The board, desperate for continuity, would look for someone who knew Victor's mind, someone who'd been with him from the start. Someone like Miles. He would step up reluctantly, framing it as a duty to carry on his friend's legacy. And the missing money, he'd spin it as restructuring costs, debts, a misunderstanding buried under 1,000 pages of legal paperwork. The perfect crime wrapped in sympathy. He only needed one thing to go right. Victor had to eat from that special plate. But here's what Miles didn't plan for. People who had nothing to gain, making choices anyway. Elena, standing in the side room, reopened her laptop after Miles left. Her heart raced. Her finger hovered over a button. She could walk away. She could pretend she saw nothing. Keep her job. Keep her comfortable salary. Stay in Victor's good graces. Oh, she could dig deeper. She clicked. More data filled the screen. More transfers. More signatures. Come on, Elena, she whispered to herself. You graduated top of your class. You survived 3 years in forensic accounting hell. You know what this looks like. It looked like fraud. She compiled documents, screen-captured statements, exported files. She attached them to an encrypted folder and sent them to an email address she rarely used, an old mentor who now worked in financial crime investigations. Subject, agent, possible fraud involving Victor Hale's partner. She hit send. This is the moment, a voice in your head might say if this were your story. They stopped being just an employee and started being a whistleblower. For Elena, it was the moment she chose truth over comfort. Down on the street, Liam made his own choice. He'd found the back entrance. He watched staff moving in and out, their faces flushed from the heat of the kitchen. He could have turned away right then. He could have told himself it was none of his business. But his mother's voice was in his ear. If you ever see someone about to make the same mistake I did, you stop them. So he walked up to the security guard by the loading dock, heart pounding. Excuse me, he said. Say. The guard barely glanced at him. You're not allowed back here. Move along. I think something's wrong with the food, Liam blurted. That got the guard's attention. What did you say? He frowned. The food, Liam said, gesturing toward the kitchen door. The fancy stuff. I smelled something. It's wrong. It's dangerous. The guard sighed. Kid, everything smells wrong when you live on the street. You're probably just not used to it. He turned away. Liam's throat tightened. I'm serious, he insisted. It smells like hospital cleaners. Like the stuff they said killed my mom. The guard froze for a second, then shook his head. Look, I don't have time for this, he said, voice hardening. You need to go. Now, before I call someone to move you along. He reached for his radio. Liam felt panic rise. Nobody was listening. So he did the only thing left. He slipped past the guard while he was bringing the radio to his mouth. Hey, the guard shouted. Get back here. But Liam was small and fast, ducking under trays and weaving between crates as he dashed through the doorway into the hotel staff corridor. Back in the ballroom, the mood was warm and generous. People laughed at the MC's jokes, applauded videos showing before and after images of families helped by the Hale Foundation. Victor stepped up to the microphone, cleared his throat, and began his speech. I was once a boy who slept hungry, he said, his voice steady. Tonight, I stand in front of you with more blessings than I ever imagined. But I don't tell you that to boast. I tell you because I never want to forget where I came from. The crowd hushed, moved by his sincerity. In the corner, Miles watched him with an unreadable expression. Elena stood near the side wall, her phone vibrating faintly in her hand. She glanced down. One new email. From her mentor. She opened it. Elena, this is serious. What you've sent is enough to trigger an investigation. But be careful. If what I suspect is true, someone close to Victor has been moving a lot of money. Don't confront them alone. Save everything. Protect yourself. I'm forwarding this to a contact in law enforcement. Stay put if you can. We may need to come there tonight. Her heart jumped into her throat. She looked up. Miles was no longer in the corner. He was gone. In the service corridors, Liam kept moving, ignoring the shouts behind him. He followed the sound of clinking glass and muffled music, trusting it to lead him to the main event. He emerged at the edge of a curtain, peeking out. What he saw looked like another world. Round tables with white cloths, candles flickering, flowers, a stage, a man in a dark suit speaking into a microphone, his voice booming through speakers. Never want to forget where I came from, Victor was saying as Liam watched. Liam's eyes stuck on the man's face. He'd seen that face before, on billboards, on screens in shop windows, in pamphlets handed out at shelters. Victor Hale, building hope for tomorrow. He'd heard people in line say, that man, he donated enough to build this place. Others had scoffed, yeah, and he got a tax break. Don't kid yourself. Liam didn't know which was true. He just knew that right now, that man was the one about to eat the food that smelled like his mother's last meal. He scanned the tables quickly. Most plates were empty. They hadn't started serving the main course yet. He spotted a group of waiters lined up near the kitchen doors, each carrying a tray of plates, waiting for the signal. He also saw something else. Near the head table, a man in a dark suit not unlike Victor's leaned down to speak to a waiter carrying a single plate with extra garnishes. Miles, you bring that one to Mr. Hale yourself, Miles said, smiling. Make sure it goes to him and no one else. Got it. The waiter nodded nervously. Why, yes, sir. Liam's stomach twisted. That plate, he thought. It looks like. His hand closed around the full container inside his backpack. He made a decision. He slipped under the curtain. Victor finished his speech to a standing ovation. As he stepped away from the microphone, the MC announced dinner. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the meal specially prepared for you tonight by Chef Marco and his incredible team. Waiters flowed into the room like a well-choreographed dance. Plates appeared in front of guests, towers of food, sauces drizzled with precision. At the head table, the waiter Miles had instructed walked carefully toward Victor, his hands slightly shaking, the special plate balanced perfectly. Miles watched from a few feet away, feigning casual interest. He saw the fork, the knife, the gentle clink as they were placed beside the plate. He saw Victor sit down, smile, and thank the waiter. Then, from the far corner, he saw movement. Small, quick, out of place. Liam. The boy ran along the wall, heart pounding, eyes locked on the head table. A few guests noticed him and frowned. Who is that? Someone's child. Security. But Liam didn't slow down. As Victor picked up his fork, ready to take the first bite, a voice cut through the music, shaky but fierce. Don't eat it. Every head turned. Liam skidded to a stop beside the head table, chest heaving, eyes wide. Two security guards lunged after him, hands outstretched. He ducked out of their reach and grabbed the edge of Victor's chair. Please, he gasped, looking straight into the billionaire's eyes for the first time. Don't eat that. It's dangerous. The room buzzed with confusion. Victor blinked. Up close, the boy was even thinner than he'd looked from afar. His clothes were torn, his hair messy, his eyes bright with fear. What are you doing here? One of the guards growled, grabbing Liam's arm. Get him out, another said. Wait, Victor said, raising a hand. The guards hesitated. Victor studied the boy. What did you say? He asked quietly. I smelled it, Liam stammered. This food. I got some earlier from the kitchen. It smells wrong. It smells like something they put in my mom's food in the hospital. She died. A ripple of discomfort ran through the room. People glanced at their plates. Miles stepped forward, laughing lightly. "Victor, this is ridiculous," he said. "He's just a homeless kid who got in where he shouldn't be. He probably ate something rotten from the trash and now thinks everything's poisoned." His words were smooth, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the reactions. Chef Marco arrived at the head table, face flushed. "Mr. Hale, I am so sorry," he said. "We have strict quality control. Nothing like what this boy is saying could possibly happen, eh?" Elena pushed her way through the crowd too, drawn by the commotion. Victor looked at the plate, then at Liam. "You said you got some of this earlier?" he asked. Liam nodded quickly. "Yes, from the back. A worker gave me some. It smelled like this. I didn't eat it." He yanked his backpack open, pulled out the small foil container, and placed it on the table. There were gasps of disapproval. "Where did he get that?" "Is that from our kitchen? This is unsanitary." Miles smirked. "You see, he's clearly just a scavenger," he said. "Probably trying to cause a scene for attention or money. Security, please." "Hold on," Elena said suddenly. All eyes turned to her. "Victor," she said, her voice steady but urgent, "we should test it." Miles scoffed. "Test it? With what, magic?" "Chef Marco," Elena went on, ignoring him, "you have allergy testing strips, don't you? For cross-contamination in the kitchen." Marco blinked. "Yes, but—" "Then use them," she said. "At least on a small piece. Right now. In front of everyone." The room went quiet. The waiter who had carried Victor's plate shifted nervously. "If we're going to calm everyone down, we need to show them there's nothing to worry about," Elena added. Victor nodded slowly. "She's right," he said. "Marco, humor me." Miles opened his mouth to protest, then shut it. He didn't want to look unreasonable in front of donors. "Fine," he said through clenched teeth. "If that's what it takes." Marco went pale, but he nodded. He took a small piece from Victor's plate, placed it on a napkin, and pulled a small kit from his pocket, a fast-acting test strip the kitchen used when they needed to make sure no trace of certain allergens remained. It's not designed for poisons," he warned, "but it can react to unusual chemical compositions. Still, I assure you." He dabbed the strip onto the sauce. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the strip turned a color it should never have turned. Bright purple. Marco stared. "What does that mean?" a guest called out. Marco's hand shook. "It means," he swallowed, "it means there's something in this dish that shouldn't be, hey?" A stunned silence fell over the room. Then someone screamed. Chairs scraped. People pushed away from tables. Plates clattered to the floor. In the chaos, Liam felt the grip on his arm tighten. He looked up to see the guard's eyes wide, his tough demeanor shaken. "Elena," Victor said, voice low. "Call the police. Now." Miles stepped forward, hands raised. "Wait a second," he said. "We don't know what that strip reacted to. It could be a harmless chemical, a mislabeling, anything. Let's not jump to—" "Mislabeling?" Elena snapped. "Like the mislabeling I just saw in the foundation accounts. The ones you signed." Miles froze. His face drained of color, then flushed red. "What are you talking about?" he hissed. "I sent the documents to an investigator," Elena said loudly, "so the nearby guests could hear. They're on their way. Maybe they can help us decide whether this is mislabeling or something else." Victor's gaze hardened. "Miles," he said slowly, "what did you do?" For the first time all night, Miles's confident mask slipped. "This is insane," he said. "You're going to believe this street kid and your paranoid assistant over me, after everything we've built together." He took a step back, as if measuring the distance to the nearest exit, but he didn't make it far, because at that moment, two figures in plain clothes stepped into the ballroom, badges flashing. "Detectives," one of them announced. "We're looking for Victor Hale and Elena Alvarez." Elena's phone vibrated again. She looked at the caller ID. Her mentor. She exhaled shakily. "They are here," she whispered. The next half hour was chaos, the kind of chaos that, if you've ever lived through anything shocking, you know you don't remember in straight lines. Guests huddled together, some angry, some frightened. Staff moved nervously, whispering, glancing at the police. Plates were carefully collected as potential evidence. Detectives moved swiftly, asking questions, taking samples, isolating the head table. Victor sat in a side room with Elena, Liam, Chef Marco, and the two detectives. "My team received the documents you sent, Ms. Alvarez," one detective said, flipping through a folder. "They paint a troubling picture. Large sums moved from the foundation to shell companies over the past year. Companies linked to accounts controlled by Miles Crane." Victor's jaw tightened. Miles would never, he began. Then he stopped himself. The detective continued. "When we received that information, we were already en route," he said. "We intended to speak with Mr. Hale first, quietly, but then we got an urgent message from hotel security about a possible contamination in the food. Given the timing, we take this very seriously." Liam sat in the corner, legs swinging nervously, clutching his backpack. "I'm sorry if I caused trouble," he mumbled. Victor turned to look at him, really look at him. "You didn't cause this," he said gently. "You might have stopped something terrible." One detective held up the rapid test kit. "Our preliminary tests on Mr. Hale's plate showed traces of a compound that shouldn't be anywhere near food," he said. "We'll know more once the lab confirms, but it appears deliberate." Chef Marco buried his face in his hands. "I swear, I would never poison anyone," he cried. "My whole career." "We know," the detective said calmly. "So let's start with this. Who had access to these ingredients? Who knew which plate was going to Mr. Hale?" Marco sniffed, thinking. "All the senior staff saw the menu," he said. "But the truffle oil, that was delivered separately. And only the management knew we were making a special plate for Mr. Hale." He looked up slowly, dread in his eyes. "Management like Mr. Crane." At that moment, the door swung open. A uniformed officer leaned in. "Sir," he said to the detective, "we attempted to bring Mr. Crane in for questioning." "Attempted," the detective repeated sharply. "We tried to leave through the back stairwell," the officer explained. "When we stopped him, he became evasive. He's being detained now. We found this in his inside jacket pocket." He held up a small vial, half empty. Even from across the room, Liam felt a chill. The vial looked like the little bottle the hospital nurse had dropped the day his mother died, the one the doctor had whispered about afterward. The detective took the vial carefully, gloved. "That'll go straight to the lab," he said. "But I've seen containers like this before." His expression hardened. "And it's never for anything good." Victor looked like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart. "Miles," he whispered. "Why?" The detective closed his notebook. "That's what we're going to find out," he said. "But for now, Mr. Hale, you should know something. If this boy hadn't spoken up, if your assistant hadn't insisted on testing the food, you might not be sitting here." Victor turned to Liam again. "What's your name?" he asked softly. Liam blinked. "Liam," he said. "Liam Carter." "Liam," Victor repeated. "Thank you." He meant it with a weight Liam hadn't heard in an adult's voice in a long time. The story hit the news faster than anyone could have predicted. Within hours, headlines blazed across screens. Billionaire nearly poisoned at own charity gala. Partner detained in connection with attempted murder and financial fraud. Homeless boy credited with saving Victor Hale's life. If you've ever watched a scandal unfold online, you know how it goes. People who had never met Victor suddenly had opinions about him. Some called him a hero of resilience. Others scoffed, saying the whole thing was probably a publicity stunt. But one thing was clear. Miles Crane's carefully constructed image collapsed. Once the investigation began, the evidence poured out like water from a cracked dam. Emails, bank transfers, signed approvals. The vial from his pocket matched traces found in Victor's contaminated dish and in the leftover portion Liam had kept. Experts confirmed it was a slow-acting poison, designed to cause a heart incident that could be mistaken for natural causes in someone under high stress. It wasn't theatrical. It was cold. The prosecution argued that Miles intended Victor's death to look like a tragic but plausible event. A man with enormous responsibilities, collapsing at a high-pressure event. But he hadn't counted on a homeless boy's nose and a promise made at a dying woman's bedside. In court, Miles tried to maintain his composure. He wore expensive suits. He smiled for cameras. He denied everything. "It's all circumstantial," he said. "Those accounts were part of restructuring. The vial, planted. The food contamination, a mistake." But the evidence stacked up. Witnesses testified that Miles had been unusually insistent about Victor eating from that specific plate. The kitchen staff confirmed that he'd handled ingredients he had no reason to touch. Digital forensics traced the shell companies back to identities Miles used for other side deals. And then there were Miles's own messages, the ones he thought he'd deleted. "Make sure he eats it." Those 4 words landed in the courtroom like a hammer. The jury didn't take long. Guilty. Financial fraud. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. Miles Crane was sentenced to a long time in a place where he would never again control bank accounts or menus. For Victor, the consequences were different, but just as real. The board of his companies demanded answers. "How did you not see this?" they pressed. Investors asked, "If your partner was involved in fraud, what does that say about your judgment?" He could have grown defensive. He could have blamed Miles entirely and walked away pretending he had no part in the environment that allowed it. Instead, he did something harder. He took responsibility. At a press conference weeks later, Victor stood behind a podium. Cameras pointed at him. "I failed," he said plainly. "Not because I poisoned anyone. I didn't. But because I allowed myself to be distracted by ambition. I stopped paying attention to the details, to the people, to the signs. I trusted blindly when I should have looked closer. And people could have died because of that." He paused, letting the weight of his words sit. "You're going to see headlines about my former partner," he continued. "You're going to hear about his crimes. But I want you to hear this from me. Power is not just about what you do with your money. It's about what you ignore. And I ignored far too much." It wasn't a legal admission of guilt. It was something deeper. A moral one. And for many watching, that mattered. For Liam, everything changed too. But not in the way some people expected. Victor didn't sweep him into a mansion and declare, "You're my new son now," like in some movie. Reality was messier, slower, more human. The first thing Victor did was make sure Liam had a safe place to sleep that night. "Just for tonight," Liam said shyly, looking around the clean room at the small shelter Victor funded. "I don't need." "You need more than one night," Victor replied. "And we're going to figure that out. Together." Liam didn't trust him immediately. Why would he? Adults had promised him things before. Social workers, volunteers, even relatives who'd said, "We'll come back for you," and never did. But Victor kept showing up. He met with the shelter staff personally. He learned that Liam's mother had died 2 years earlier, that child services had tried to place him, that he'd run away from a foster home where he'd been treated like an inconvenience. Instead of forcing Liam back into the same system, Victor funded a new program, a partnership between his foundation and vetted foster families, with additional oversight, mental health support, and educational opportunities. He didn't design it alone. He listened to experts. He listened to kids who'd been through the system. He listened to Liam. "That's the first time an adult asked me what I wanted instead of telling me what I should be grateful for," Liam would later say. Liam was placed with a foster family who lived in a modest apartment, not far from the neighborhoods he knew. Close enough to feel familiar, far enough to be safe. The first night there, he sat on the edge of a real bed, staring at the ceiling. He reached into his backpack and pulled out his mother's photo. "We're okay, Mom," he whispered. "I think we're finally okay." He kept his promise to her. A year passed. The city moved on, as cities do. New scandals arose. New headlines replaced the old. People went back to work, to school, to scrolling their feeds. But for the people at the heart of that night, everything was different. Victor Hale's companies looked leaner, more transparent. Several board members had been replaced after internal investigations. New accountability measures were set up. External auditors were given more power. Victor sold one of his private jets and redirected the funds into a project no one had expected, a chain of community centers across the city, each with a shelter wing, a tutoring space, and a small kitchen. In each kitchen, there was a simple rule: nothing was thrown away if it was safe to eat. Instead, leftover food was packaged safely and handed out at specific times to those who needed it, no questions asked. One of those centers stood not far from the bridge where Liam had once slept on cardboard. Victor visited that center often, not as a billionaire making a grand entrance, but as a man in rolled-up sleeves, helping stack boxes, sitting in on meetings, listening to people's stories. Sometimes, he'd catch his reflection in the glass and see flashes of both boys he'd been, the hungry child staring at bakery windows and the ambitious man staring at stock tickers. He didn't want to erase either of them. He wanted to reconcile them. Liam, meanwhile, discovered something surprising. He liked school. At first, it was overwhelming. The routine, the rules, the stares from kids who'd lived completely different lives. He felt out of place. But he was smart. The kind of smart that comes from having to read the world quickly just to survive. When he finally had textbooks instead of street signs, his mind soaked them up. He struggled with trust, with sudden noises, with feeling like everything could be taken away in an instant. His foster parents were patient. Therapists helped him unravel knots he didn't know he had. And slowly, he began to see a future where he wasn't just the homeless boy who saved a billionaire, but Liam. Just Liam. One day, his class had career project. They were supposed to write about what they wanted to be when they grew up. Other kids chose things like doctor, footballer, singer, YouTuber. Liam thought about it for a long time. Finally, he wrote, food safety inspector. His teacher raised an eyebrow when she read it. That's very specific, she said with a small smile. Why that? Liam shrugged, then smiled back. Because sometimes, he said, just checking what's on a plate can save someone's life. He didn't tell the whole story. Not everyone needed to know. But he knew. And so did Victor. On the anniversary of the gala, Victor invited Liam and his foster family to one of the community centers. There was no press. No photographers. Just kids running around, volunteers chopping vegetables, and the smell of soup. Victor found Liam in the corner, showing another boy how to read the nutrition label on a can. Hey, Victor said. Liam looked up and grinned. Hey. They walked outside together, to a small garden where herbs grew in neat rows. Smell this, Victor said, rubbing a leaf between his fingers and holding it out. Liam sniffed. Basil, he said. We used that at the center last week. Victor nodded. You know, he said, before that night, I hadn't smelled half the things in my own kitchens. I just assumed everything was fine. He looked at Liam. You changed that. Liam shifted, embarrassed. I just yelled, he said. You did all the hard stuff after. Victor shook his head. Sometimes yelling is the hard stuff, he said. Sometimes it's easier to stay quiet and hope someone else speaks up. He paused. You kept a promise to your mom, didn't you? Victor asked gently. Liam's eyes widened. How did you? You told me in the police room, Victor said softly. You thought I didn't hear, but I did. Liam looked down at his shoes. I promised I'd stop someone if I thought they were going to eat something that could hurt them, he said. I didn't know if I was right, but I couldn't not say anything, even if everyone thought I was crazy. Victor smiled sadly. I wish I'd made a promise like that when I was younger, he said. Instead, I made a different one, that I'd never be poor again. I followed that promise so hard I almost forgot to look at what it was costing me. He placed a hand on Liam's shoulder. You reminded me, he said, that money means nothing if you lose your soul, or the people you care about. Liam looked up. Do you have anyone? He asked hesitantly. Family, I mean. Victor's gaze drifted off. Not in the way people usually mean, he said. My parents are gone. I never married. I always thought I'd do that later, when things calmed down. They never did. He looked back at Liam. But family isn't just blood, he added. It's who shows up when it matters. It's who tells you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. Liam nodded slowly. Like a homeless kid screaming at a rich guy over dinner, he said, smirking a little. Victor laughed. Exactly like that, he said. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Listen, Victor added, I don't want to push. You have a good foster family, a stable home. That matters. But if you ever need anything, help with school, someone to talk to, a place to go when things feel too big, my door is open. He hesitated, then added, and if someday you want, I don't know, a mentor, or something like that, we can talk. Liam didn't answer right away. He thought about all the times adults had overpromised and underdelivered, all the times they'd said, we'll be there, and vanished. Then he thought about the last year, about how, whenever something important happened, a school meeting, a court date, a therapy session, Victor had shown up, quietly, without fanfare, sometimes just sitting in the back, nodding encouragement. He had already been that something like that without labeling it. Okay, Liam said finally, maybe we can talk. Not now, but someday. Victor smiled. I can wait, he said. Looking back, it's easy to point to the moment in the ballroom, the fork hovering in the air, the shout of don't eat it, and say, that's where everything changed. But the truth is, stories like this aren't built on one moment. They are built on a series of choices. A mother in a hospital bed telling her son to never be silent when something feels wrong. An assistant choosing to open her laptop instead of closing her eyes. A chef agreeing to test a dish even when his pride was on the line. Detectives answering an email instead of ignoring it. A powerful man choosing to listen to a scared child instead of silencing him. And yes, a homeless boy trusting his instinct enough to run across a room full of people who didn't think he belonged there. Maybe you've never been in a ballroom with a billionaire. Maybe you've never smelled something off in a plate of food. But you have been in situations where something felt wrong. A conversation that crossed a line. A joke that wasn't funny. A deal that seemed too good to be true. A friend who suddenly started acting in ways that didn't match their words. You know that feeling in your gut, that quiet tightening, that whisper, this isn't right. The easiest thing in the world is to ignore it. To tell yourself you're overreacting. To stay quiet so you don't cause a scene. To hope someone else will say something first. But here's the thing. Silence is comfortable, until it costs too much. Liam didn't know for sure that the food was poisoned. He wasn't a scientist. He didn't have proof. He had a memory, a promise, and a choice. He chose to speak. And because he did, the truth came out. Not just about a plate of food, but about a man who had been stealing, manipulating, and planning harm for a long time. All of that stayed hidden until one small voice cut through the noise. If you've ever felt like your voice doesn't matter because you're too small, too young, too poor, too late, remember this. A fortune was saved, a life was spared, and an entire system was forced to change because a boy who had nothing shouted 3 simple words. Don't eat it. So if you see someone heading towards something that feels dangerous, a toxic relationship, a risky decision, a harmful habit, don't underestimate your power. Ask a question. Speak up. Reach out. Send the message. Make the call. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be rich. You just have to care enough to not stay silent. And if you've ever been on the other side, if you've been the one with power, money, or influence, take this as your reminder. Listen to the voices it's easiest to ignore. The assistant who tells you something's off in the numbers. The worker who says the process isn't safe. The child tugging at your sleeve saying, something's wrong. Because sometimes the people with the least to gain are the ones telling you the most important truth. If you believe that integrity matters more than image. If you believe that every life has value, no matter where they slept last night. If you've ever been scared to speak up but did it anyway, you're not alone. There are more Liams in the world than you think. More Elenas. More people who are just one brave moment away from changing someone's story. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of a time you listened to your gut, or wished you had, share it with someone who needs that reminder too. And if you want more stories like this, stories about courage, betrayal, second chances, and the quiet power of doing the right thing, make sure you like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes, the stories we listen to shape the choices we make. And the choices we make, that's what writes the next chapter.